Good morning, Karl. Good to see you here.
Hi, Andy. How are you?
I'm really well, thanks. It's been a wonderful morning already. Lots of meetings and lots of things taking place, not least of which is lots of people wanting to get more involved with the Festival of Research, which is what this sort of event's all about. And it's great to have you here because I think we talked about this, setting up this event probably about 3 years ago, must be now, wasn't it?
Gosh, it was. I think it must have been. Yeah, it must have been over 3 years ago. And we had the idea of that first conversation. We said, "Okay, let's. How do we celebrate research?" And I think there was other sort of festivals at the time. And you said, "Well, we could go down this path." And I think from that one initial conversation, here we are, a couple of years later.
Yeah. And
Uh,
it's a strange kind of period because obviously last year we were sort of took a bit of a pause last year for obvious reasons. But then I remember the year before that we had lots of events taking place all across the campus and in Manchester as well. I know we were at the Hard Rock Cafe and had events taking place there. And I think for us it's very much about the community around us as well as the internal community of the university, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think that too often. I think for me it was when it started. If you go down the Crescent and you drive down the Crescent every day to commute, what do you know about the university? What goes on beyond that? Those grass verges and those Victorian buildings is what you pass. There's a university there, but people don't really know what happens. And it's about bringing that research and that excellence that the university engaging, both telling each other that story, but also telling the wider community and engaging the wider community and how it directly impacts on their lives. And I think Hard Rock Cafe was a great example of where part of it was about the story of the bees, I think, on the top of the building and the printworks and the way in which the research colleagues around bees and etc. is changing the wider world. So that's exactly the sort of case study that we can focus on.
Yeah, and for those people that are joining us that aren't too familiar with the University of Salford, the Festival of Research is a program of activity that goes across the university involving staff, students at all levels to talk about the impact of our research, the projects we're developing, and I think particularly trying to build new partnerships. I'm always surprised, Karl, just how many new institutions are coming into Greater Manchester that we can work with. And it feels like it's a constantly dynamic space into which new things are happening, isn't it?
Incredible, really. I mean, I think when we started, only yesterday I was meeting with a government agency that have set up in Manchester, and 3 years ago there was no thought that organisation would be coming to Manchester. There are, now some of the government have more government departments coming. There are private sector firms, very large private sector firms that are here that weren't here 3 years ago, and you can see across the region an intensification of not just firms moving in or new firms being created and new organizations moving in, but desire to plug into the wider sort of community and into the university as well. And that for me is a great opportunity both for Salford and for higher education and for the wider society.
Definitely. And there is so much happening in Greater Manchester that is cutting across all aspects of research. And I sort of think about some of our major partnerships with organizations like the Science and Industry Museum and everything that we have over at the remarkable Media City campus, which is full of SMEs, organizations that are doing incredible work, including the BBC and ITV. And I think that aspect of creating a festival is really what sort of frames today's sort of discussion. We titled this Imagine a Festival, I think partly because we're involved with lots of festivals, aren't we?
Oh gosh, well, it's as you say, Festival of Science and a range of others. And colleagues across the university, are working with Walk the Plank and things of that nature as well, in preparation for next year's large national festival. And I think festivals are really important as a means to, both to celebrate and to communicate. And to engage entirely new audiences that wouldn't normally sort of, have the opportunity or the time to to sit down and listen to a lecture by an academic or something of that nature. And the great thing with festivals is it forces the academics, I would say, to sort of think about how they present in a way which doesn't happen in sort of a conventional sort of inaugural lecture or something of that nature.
Yeah, and I know that in recent sort of the last couple of months, there's been some research to talk about how universities can make themselves more open to their local communities, but also make the campuses more porous and hopefully involve more people. I think creating a festival is a way of sort of welcoming people into our buildings as much as anything, but also I think more widely into our community, isn't it?
Oh, I think so. And I think there's when we did the last one in person 2 years ago, the last day of that was doing stuff in Peel Park. And the researchers had to sort of present in Peel Park, and local school children came along and things like that. And and as the researchers had to sort of think about how they engage differently. There was also that work in Media City, biomass sort of work as well, and that was really interesting about how people could walk through a human body. And I know that got fantastic feedback and things of that nature. So I think there's some really interesting examples of the way in which that sort of engagement. So it's the engagement is both making the university more porous, but making the work more porous as well, so that people feel it has some attachment to their lives. And I think that doesn't always happen, but I think festivals have been a fantastic way in which that does occur.
I think so. And also, I suppose there's a form of collaboration as well. I know that some of the events that we've produced over the years have really kickstarted collaborations between people from very different backgrounds, whether you're a biomedical scientist starting to work with a virtual reality designer. These sorts of interfaces don't often happen in the day-to-day, and a festival can really be a useful way to sort of usher in that new conversation, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think when you do go, it's also the fact that even if you go and you maybe, your particular discipline may not have a massive role in it, and you watch someone else's engagement, and then you think, oh, that's the way they presented that. Is there a way we could do that? And I think that drives innovation in the academic community as well. So I think it works both the benefit for the wider society and I think for the academic community.
And I think certainly for the university, there are so many partnerships that we have where there's lots of kind of public engagement events, often focused around festivals. And we do have sort of variety of things from those, either from programming activity to then trying to help with the curation of events. But I think one of the things that really strikes me as powerful about it is how we can build a more, I guess, solidarity. And I sort of conscious over the last 15 months, how our involvement with many of the festivals that had to sort of move into an online delivery has been something we've really tried to support. And we worked with Cheltenham Science Festival last year in particular. But I think we're at an interesting point in history, but also I think in the history of education, arts, where COVID has sort of given us a moment to sort of think about that digital offer and how we can create compelling experiences. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think it's something that's going to grow quickly, or how do you see it developing?
I think there's I suppose it depends what's part of the cycle you'd have asked me that question at. I think, when we had the pandemic started and everyone had to work from home, I think there was that sort of talk of a brave new world, and the idea of virtual with virtual. I think as we've gone on, the desire to reconnect in person has probably grown stronger. So I think we're looking more of a blended approach to festivals in the future. Well, the great thing about the interactive world in festivals is that we can reach far more people in a greater range of places than we could do previously. If you think about those really large festivals, that are often ticket based. Well, actually, in that scenario, only a certain number could see them, and so that we relied on the broadcast media to present them to a wider public that weren't fee paying. That's it's quite a linear sort of process in that basis, and I think the new online one would enable those sort of audiences, those wider audiences that can't get to them in person, to engage and feel part of the audience in situ as well. And I think that's what the sort of online world contributes to the way in which festivals will look in the future. So I think there'll be that sort of, we'll have both face to face and online, hopefully the best of both worlds.
Yes, definitely, hopefully. And I think this year we've got all our program is online and accessible, and certainly that mindset of trying to make things available to people in that blended way that you describe has to be part of our future. I think partly because some people have found that, in fact, if you have caring responsibilities or obligations, actually attending online may be the only thing you can do. So I think this year it's great to see what sort of feedback we get, but also I think to understand how we develop that going forward. And we've got so much taking place, and we always kick off with the Spark Conference, which is a researcher conference, and we're very keen to make sure that our postgraduate researchers develop some of these skills to be more public facing in their career as they enter into academia. And that's become a big part of university life in the last few years, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think for me, Spark, is a great opportunity because PhD students, need that opportunity to present their work. but also to present it to audiences that aren't always specialists in their field, because often the questions you get from non-specialist audiences can be really insightful and can actually force you to rethink what you're trying to do, and at the same time think about the way in which you're communicating it. And that, in a specialist audience, it can get quite dry and everyone understands the topic, and there's a series of assumptions and leaps that aren't there with a non-specialist audience. The other side of it is that increasingly academics are seen as the importance. Well, it's an important part for academics to be able to communicate effectively in terms of impact and the impact of our work. So this is the opportunity for our PhD students to start to articulate the impact of their work. It's something that those that go on to work in academia will have to do, and I think it's a really good skill to learn very early in their career, rather than sort of trying to sort of retrain them once they've finished their PhD. So I do see it as an essential part of their development.
For sure. And I think one of the other things I was aware, certainly over the last few years, is just how much there is happening in public. That, you think about the social media platforms that now allow us to reach out to people directly. You only have to look over the last 50 months to see how important that aspect of expert input into communication is really valuable. And we've got lots of really exciting things happening across the festival, which I just want to share with our audience here, because we have something, we kick off on the 30th of June, and then we've got events across that first week of July, as Karl mentioned, starting off with the Spark conference. I'm really excited we have this Failure Friday event taking place on the 2nd of July, because I remember when I had a Nesta grant a few years ago, and a lot of the Nesta team were talking about the sort of importance of failure, to really try and to explore and experiment. And I think often that ambition goes along with aspects of failure, doesn't it? It's not something we can't take high risks and reach a really extraordinary end without the risk of failure.
Well, I agree entirely with that. I think, and it's something which is curious, because I think when you look at researchers through their sort of academic development, all the way through as young people sort of going to school and then go to university, most researchers actually, most young people, etc., are terrified of failure, because we drive them to success. And those that are often end up as researchers are the most successful. They've done very well at school, they've excelled in everything, they've gone to university, excelled in their undergraduate course, and then the master's course, and they're used to success because they have worked very hard at it. And then when you get to research, you suddenly realize that everyone starts talking about failure all the time and the things that don't work, and that's normal, and that's the way the world works, because research does not progress in a linear process, and rarely do things go right, and things go wrong for a whole range of different reasons. And the results are often not what you expect as well. And there's obviously a long history of, the results not being what expected, but actually being serendipitous. But often they're not serendipitous. They just don't work, and you have to sort of reconfigure and think again and replan. So I think the notion of, talking about that element of failure and learning to fail and learning to embrace failure, because failure is the best step towards learning and improvement next time, I think is really crucial. And I think that, having it embedded within this conference is really important. And I also think it's important for a wider society as well. We always say to young people, take risks, take opportunities, be more innovative. And innovation seems really important in terms of, national development, economic development, etc. But of course, the thing about innovation is it fails an awful lot. That's the point. If it was easy, everyone would do it. We'd have more innovation, and it wouldn't really be innovation. The whole point is it is a challenge, and therefore raising aspirations for people to try and not make things work, and don't worry about it, because actually that's part of the learning process, and then you start again, and it's what you learn from that experience that matters, not the experience itself. I think is really important message, and it's an important part of the festival, and I'm really pleased to see it's part of the agenda this time.
And I think for me, there's also a common ground between that and actually the culture of festivals, not necessarily the UK, but certainly Greater Manchester. We've worked with Manchester International Festival, the Abandoned Normal Devices Festival, and Manchester Science Festival. In fact, its slogan is part playground, part laboratory. And I think that aspect of experimentation is often something that festivals can facilitate really well. And what I really love about this program that we have over the next weekend, well, beginning 30th of June, is that I think it's a very values-based program. So we're really interested in trying to bridge the gap between disciplines, try to think about the crossover between theory, practice, and research, and also to think about our geographic location as well. So unfortunately, the research in the park isn't happening in Peel Park, but my goodness, when it does, Peel Park is an extraordinary place to visit, and I think appreciate just the situation of where we are as a university is a beautiful area with so much around us.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I think if you go back to parks, parks, as you say, are places of play. That's what we associate parks with. But they're also fantastic sites for research activity as well. And certainly if we're lucky at Salford, because of course the university is built inside a park. And that sort of entry point is really important in the story that we tell about the university and the research that we do. But it's also important that the community feel that the university is part of that park as well, and that it's for them. It isn't just for those of us that are privileged enough to work in it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And you're right. The sort of history of parks as a sort of public spaces, I think, is often very closely connected to the history of festivals. And I think what's coupled with that is that where often a lot of the festivals are led by sort of art sector collaborations, you really have attention to thinking about evaluation and assessing impact, understanding the audiences that have been reached or haven't been reached. And I think the art sector in particular has really gone a long way in the last sort of 30 years to understand audiences really effectively. And I think that's partly what's valuable for us collaborating with institutions. It brings that insight, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think if we go back to the story about parks, it's hard to, parks have always been linked to the arts. If you think about it, it's hard to imagine a picture of a park that doesn't have somebody reading a book. That it is always, the association's strongly been there. Virtually every music festival is in a park by definition. Yeah. Doesn't tend to be in, well, some of them are in car parks, but most of them are in parks or playing fields of some type. So I think the arts have always understand the importance of parks. I think the other side for me is, and I think this is the newer part, in the way in which we now see that the festivals, both ours and wider, the way in which the importance of science itself plays in those parks. Obviously, environmental science is the most obvious, but right across the scientific fields, we can see a way in which the festivals and parklands sort of interact in a way in which probably 20, 30 years ago, we didn't even cross our minds that this was relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking ahead, what would you kind of hope this festival does for the university, for the people involved, and for our sort of community around us?
Well, I hope it continues, because obviously it's third one, and obviously it's online this year, but I hope it continues sort of the sense, both within the academic community, that engaging with their wider community is a valuable thing to do, that they can see some benefit from it and they want to do it, they want to do more of it. I think for the wider community, it's about hopefully this great sense of pride about their own institution, and the way in which the excellence that happens at that institution, but also greater awareness of what the university does as well, and a desire to find out more. Curiosity is really important. I think, research is driven by curiosity. And if people are interested in what people are researching, that helps us as well. And I think some of the big research challenges that we face in the future, we need public engagement. We need public engagement because the things that we can't see around the corner are often the ethical and moral dilemmas. And we're going to have some huge ethical moral dilemmas with some of the technologies that we're now developing. And only the public can sort of point out what those are and actually present them in a way in which we can actually understand the passion behind them and then sort of address them. Often researchers are working on their project. They're probably not all the time thinking about how this is going to be received. They're thinking about, does it work? And I think that's what, public engagement really helps, and things like festivals really help, because it does force the researcher to say, oh gosh, they didn't like that, oh, that didn't like that. That's an interesting ethical dilemma that I hadn't really thought about. I think that's really important for us to capture, and hopefully as we go forward, festivals like ours will continue to sort of engage with those bigger topics.
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. And hopefully, I think also that open space in which people can do a whole range of different things. And what I love about our program is that it's not just, conversations, discussions. There's really experimental formats of things that we kind of want people to propose, whether it's poetry readings or writing sprints that are really fantastic ways of getting ideas out, or even just setting up very informal conversations about ideas. I think that aspect of nurturing the openness of the festival so that people feel welcome to propose and deliver whatever it is that they have in their head as being important is a big part of the ethos. So that's been a wonderful sort of way to kick off the conversation for the festival, Karl. Thanks so much for being here. And I will sort of invite people to take a look at the program and see what's on offer. There is so much, but you can also propose new events either for this year or next year if you've got something in your head you want to get out there. So I look forward to seeing you at the festival, Karl, and hopefully in face-to-face at some point soon in the future.
Thanks, Andy, and good luck to everyone involved in the festival, and hope everyone enjoys it. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.